I heard this shit is a movie. The search. You got yeah. You guys ever heard of this? The search of D.B. Cooper. You guys know about this? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Jinxie and Raid are 0-5. Chop the tourney, bro. Wait, you guys already saw this? There's no way! I never saw this shit. I never even heard of it, bro.
A daring parachute escape from a flying 727 somewhere between wings.
Search was
Come on.
the plane immediately.
What is this, bro?
Where he came from or where he went. I expect that we'll keep looking until.
Chad, is this a good video? Is this a good video? Why am I getting? DB Cooper would win a roller prime, not gonna lie. Wait, who is this guy? DB Cooper. Chad, this is like, I feel like I'm watching a movie right now, bro. Chapter 1. The hijacking.
Afternoon of November the 24th, 1970, a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase walked into Portland International Airport and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington.
Oregon to Seattle.
The man identified himself as Dan Cooper, and along with 36 other passengers and a crew of 6, he soon boarded Northwest Airlines Flight 305.
Is the audio good, chap?
Once aboard, Cooper made himself comfortable in the middle of the last row of seats on the right side of the cabin. He ordered a drink and had a smoke, because this was the 70s.
You can't. Oh, I was about to
Once the flight
say.
was cleared for departure, Cooper turned around and handed an envelope to flight attendant Florence Schaffner.
Reach this up, Mike.
Inside the envelope was a note featuring a handwritten message stating he had a bomb.
Whoa! Hold on, hey, this just took a turn. Who had a bomb? Wait, I shouldn't be laughing at that, bro. My bad.
Schaffner reluctantly sat down beside him and glimpsed what appeared to be 8 sticks of dynamite inside his briefcase. Cooper's demands were quite simple. He wanted $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes.
What
he
the?
also wanted a truck to stand ready to refuel the aircraft once they landed in Seattle. Should they fail to comply with his demands, he threatened to, quote, do the job. Once the flight was airborne, Schaffner went to inform the cockpit crew, while another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow remained by Cooper's side.
Where are they getting
By using a
200,000?
telephone in the rear of the cabin, Mucklow acted as an intermediary between Cooper and the rest of the flight crew for the remainder of the hijacking. For the next hour and a half, Flight 305 maintained a holding pattern near Seattle, while local and federal authorities scrambled to procure the ransom as well as the 4 parachutes.
That's DB
10,000
Cooper.
$20 bills were collected from a local bank, while the owner of a nearby skydiving school supplied the chutes.
Wait, hold
At
on.
5:45
Sorry for the pause. So let's get this right. Hold on, because I'm kind of lost right now. So DB Cooper pulled up on the plane with a bomb. He told the lady, get me 200,000 or else I'm blowing this bomb and killing everyone in parachutes. So they did circles in the air? Wait, so then the people called up a bank to get 200,000? Bro, why don't they just say no?
5 p.m., more than 2 hours past its scheduled arrival, Flight 305 finally touched down in Seattle. By this point, it was well after sunset, and the aircraft was brought to a remote section of the tarmac. Once the flight came to a stop, both the ransom and the parachutes were handed over to Mucklow, who then brought them back aboard. In exchange, Cooper permitted 2 of the flight attendants as well as all the passengers to disembark, many of whom had not yet realized the flight had been hijacked.
I didn't even know.
With the ransom paid and only 4 crew members remaining on board, Cooper told Mucklow to inform the captain that he wanted to fly to Mexico City.
Mexico? Hey, that's the route!
With the landing gear down, the flaps at 15 degrees and below 10,000 feet. The lights in the cabin were to be switched off, and the aft stairway, which opens from the underbelly of the fuselage, was to remain extended. 2 of Cooper's demands could not be satisfied. First of all, the flight configuration he'd requested would not allow for a non-stop flight to Mexico City.
Yeah, bro, that shit's
As
like
such, Cooper proposed a refueling
10
stop in
hours.
Phoenix, Yuma, or Sacramento before they all agreed on Reno, Nevada. Second of all, it was not possible to depart with the ventral staircase extended. Cooper agreed to retract the stairs on the condition that Mucklow remained by his side and taught him how to extend them once the plane was airborne. Parked for nearly 2 hours due to complications with
Yo, is this
refueling,
real, bro?
Flight 305 was back in the air by 7:36 p.m. Less than 5 minutes after takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to head for the cockpit and that from this point onwards, he was not to be disturbed. The last time she saw Cooper, he was standing in the middle of the aisle as if though he was preparing to jump.
Oh.
Mucklow joined the rest of the crew, locked the cockpit door behind her, and some 3 hours later, Flight 305 safely landed in Reno. Once the flight came to a stop, the crew carefully ventured into the rear of the cabin, but there was no sign of Cooper nor the bomb.
Hold on. How did he get a bomb on the plane, bro? There's literally security. Bro, when I go on the airport, bro, I'm not even trolling. Yo, I'm not even trolling, bro. I go to the machine, I put my hands up, bro, and then the guy searches me. Yo, I'm not even trolling. Like right here, bro, it came up red. So the guy had to like put his hands like right here. I swear, bro. I was like, yo, what are you doing, you fucking weirdo? He was like, something came up red on your genital area. I gotta tap you out. Or like he said something like that. And bro, he put his hands like on my balls. I'm not even trolling.
Stairway had been extended mid-flight and was slightly damaged upon landing. It seemed there was only one
I didn't like
explanation
it, bro.
for the hijacker's absence. At some point between Seattle and Reno,
He's got a butt
Cooper
plug
had
in.
strapped on a parachute, walked down the stairs, and leaped into the dark of night.
Who the fuck is this guy? Just jumped off? Where's the 200K? What happened to the 200K? The manhunt begins. Okay.
As soon as it became clear that Cooper was no longer
Why is there
on
delay?
board,
There's no delay.
dozens of FBI agents
No, there's
converged
no
upon
delay.
the aircraft, only to discover a disappointing amount of physical evidence. A black clip-on tie,
Brought it with him? Oh.
8 cigarette butts,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 of the 4 parachutes were all that Cooper left behind. Evidently, he'd brought the ransom and briefcase along with him. In interviews conducted on the night of the hijacking, Cooper was described by the crew and passengers as a white male with brown eyes and dark hair. He appeared to be in his mid-40s and wore a dark trench coat, a dark suit, a
Mid-40s
white shirt,
doing that
a black
too?
tie, and dark shoes. Soon after boarding, he'd also donned a pair of sunglasses. Based on this,
Yo, there's no
description,
delay,
the
bro!
FBI produced the first
Oh, he looks like a
of
fucking
several
mob
comprehensive
boss.
sketches. Before they could mount a search, however, the FBI had to figure out when Cooper abandoned ship. But that was easier said than done. None of the 4 crew members witnessed Cooper jumping from the plane, nor did the pilots of 2 fighter jets which escorted the flight between Seattle and Reno, which is not all too surprising given it was the middle of the night. Although the flight crew did report something odd, the last communication with the hijacker occurred at approximately 8:05 p.m. when the crew used the intercom to offer assistance, which Cooper declined. Within the next 10 minutes, the crew experienced what they described as an oscillation or vibration of the aircraft.
What's an
At the time,
oscillation?
the crew suspected it might have been produced by Cooper's jump, and a subsequent recreation of the hijacking supported that conclusion. Okay, so
This
that's
guy's
the case
a
of the what, but
badass
what about
dog.
the where? While Cooper was very explicit about the flight's configuration and destination, he never specified any kind of route. In fact, Cooper grew so impatient with the slow refueling in Seattle that he dismissed the captain's request to
Take a
find a
moment.
flight plan and simply told him to, quote, get the show on the road. As such, the captain chose to fly along an airway known as Victor 23 without any input from Cooper. By using Victor 23 as a guide, authorities estimated the most probable location of the flight at the approximated time of the jump was about 40 kilometers north of
Bro
Portland.
just jumped into the
And
fucking
so,
tropical
at the break of
rainforest?
dawn, the
Like, what are
FBI
you
mounted an
doing, you
impressive
goof?
search operation using helicopters, airplanes, and ground troops. The problem was, even if the estimated bailout
what?
point was accurate, Cooper's eventual
He has a
landing
bomb on
or
him, why would you
drop
chow?
zone was far more difficult
Let
to
him be.
pinpoint. The loosely defined search area covered a vast stretch of mountainous wilderness occluded by a dense forest, so it was truly like finding
So
a
what
needle
state did he
in a
drop in? It
haystack.
didn't say it.
Apart from the difficult terrain, the search was further complicated by low temperatures and inclement
What can you
weather,
do if you
which
drop
persisted
there?
for days.
You're gonna fucking drop on a
Despite
bear.
best efforts, authorities never managed to find
Look.
a single trace of Cooper, nor the
No
items
gas
he brought
stations, no
along with
fucking
him.
Walmarts, no nothing. They don't know, you idiot. Alright, bro. Chapter 3. Follow the money. Oh, the money might have
Made little to no
fell.
progress by early December, the FBI turned their attention to the $200,000 ransom. The money had been collected from the Seattle
Only
First
200K?
National Bank, which maintained a ransom package of $250,000 just for such an occasion. Because of this, the serial number...
Yo, bro, if I'm this guy, I'm asking for like 3 mil. I don't know, 200K is silly. Bro, he's gonna run out of that in like a year.
$10,020 banknotes given to Cooper had been documented in advance, a complete list of which were quickly made available to financial institutions, government agencies, and the general public. The intention
200K in the
was to make it
70s?
as difficult as possible for Cooper to spend his money.
Oh.
Northwest Airlines and several newspapers even began to offer rewards to
That's
anyone
like
who could
2
find
mil?
a note with a matching serial number. In spite of these efforts, no one ever did. That is until nearly a decade later.
A decade
In
later?
early 1980, a young
Alright, so
boy
10 years
named
later.
Brian Ingram was building a campfire on a small beach in southern Washington. As he was digging into the sand, Ingram discovered 3 bundles of cash totaling $5,880. Having heard about the infamous skyjacking, Ingram's parents brought the severely degraded bundles to the FBI. The notes were promptly inspected.
What are you doing with
and sure
200K?
enough, the serial numbers matched
Strippers
those
and
of the
coke.
ransom.
Coca-Cola.
Once the excitement subsided, however, the money managed to raise far more questions than it answered, the most significant of which was how? How did the money
Yo,
end
preach
up
this up,
so
Brendan.
far away from the drop zone?
Wait, alright,
Looking-
so when he jumped out, the money fell and the money went over there? So, oh my, bro, I'd be chalked, bro. I'd probably end it. Bro, he deadass got 200K from them. He jumped off the plane and then the money fell? Wait, am I like reading this wrong?
At this map, it might be tempting to think that Cooper simply dropped some of the money, which then fell into the News
No
River.
way.
The bundles could then have been carried further downstream
Nah,
by
that's
the
karma,
Columbia
chat.
River before finally being washed ashore at Tina Bar,
Wait.
which is the name of the beach.
Wait,
Tina
the money
Mucklow,
can wash
Tina
up?
Bar. Coincidence?
That might,
Yeah,
that might be the biggest
Anyway,
sell in
the problem
history.
with this idea is that the Columbia River flows in the opposite direction. This has led some, including members of the FBI, to re-evaluate the initial drop zone assessment. For instance, if the drop zone was much further southeast, close to a river called the Washougal River, it is conceivable, albeit improbable, that the money floated all the way down to Tina Bar. Alternatively, the bundles may have simply landed on the beach if the flight path was further to the west. Even so, natural
why?
explanations struggle to explain how 3 independent, potentially free-falling and/or free-floating bundles of cash ended up at the exact same place on the same beach.
Bro, if I'm at the beach going fucking fishing and shit, bro, if I find 200,000, I'm not telling a soul, bro. I'm jacking that shit. On everything I love, bro. I'm
To
jacking that
complicate
shit.
matters,
I don't
sediment
care.
from the riverbed was excavated and dumped onto Tina
Don't clip
Bar as
that.
part of a dredging operation in 1974. And according to one analysis, the money was discovered above this layer of
Yeah.
sediment. If true, that would mean the money came to rest at Tina Bar sometime after 1974. But a re-examination of that analysis found that what was believed to be a layer of deposited sediment might actually have been a perfectly natural layer of clay. Not only that, but the sediment was clearly dumped some distance away from where the money was discovered. Furthermore, when Ingram
So he
discovered
hid
the
it.
bundles, the rubber bands which held them together were still intact. This is significant because experiments conducted in 2009 revealed that this brand of rubber bands could not withstand exposure to open air or water
Oh.
for more than a year.
I saw that in
So,
Money
unless
Heist.
the bundles were somehow protected from the elements, they must have become buried at Tina Bar within a year of the hijacking. The most probable explanation, therefore, seems to be that Cooper or someone else deliberately buried the money.
Wait, he hit
Did he
it!
survive and
Yo!
himself? Did someone else bury the money after stumbling upon
So he
Cooper's
didn't drop
remains?
it.
If there is an explanation which does not require human intervention, it's managed to elude investigators for decades. Suffice it to say, this is a mystery within a mystery. Since Ingram's
Tina
discovery
Ba.
in 1980, both Tina Bar and the grounds around the Washougal River have been subjected to numerous searches, but to date, there's been no sign of Cooper nor the rest of the money.
Still? Chapter 4. Wait,
From the very
so we thought, so I was just laughing at this guy, but he low-key outplayed me. Yo, Nate with the sub, thank you. Bro, chat, he jumped out. I thought he fumbled. I thought he sold the money, like it just fell. Bro, he kept the money and he hid it in a shore. Yo, this guy's low-key mad smart, but they found it though, so he really did sell. Why would he fucking hide? That makes no sense.
very beginning, it was assumed by many that Cooper did not survive his daring escape. It would not make for a very thrilling conclusion to this story, but that's the thing about stories. They're usually far more exciting than reality.
They could make a game
While
about
there
this
is
shit.
no hard evidence for nor against Cooper's survival, the assumption that he fell to his death is
Wait, so if he jumped out the plane, how the fuck is he still alive?
not without merit.
Would he
When Cooper
fucking jump in the
leaped into
water?
darkness,
He
Flight
could have.
305 was plowing through a frigid rainstorm at roughly 170
See, listen, I'm
knots.
sorry for pausing, bro. When my plane's going in the air and we're going over an ocean, bro, I feel mad safe. Because if anything happened, bro, we would just jump into the water. And I know how to swim. I know how to swim hella good.
10,000 feet above southern Washington. The wind was so violent that it ripped out a placard from the aft stairway, which was later recovered in 1978 almost directly below the estimated flight path. To say that Cooper was not dressed for the occasion would be an understatement. The ground beneath him,
Why would he not be
meanwhile, was
dressed?
obscured by multiple layers of clouds, which likely means that Cooper jumped without knowing his precise location. Even if he could see the ground and had a specific drop zone in mind, the parachute he selected was non-steerable,
He would die on impact?
meaning he would not have been able to steer his descent towards a
It
specific
depends how
landing
high up
spot,
you are.
thus precluding any potential coordination with an accomplice stationed on the ground.
It depends what water you're
While
jumping
Cooper
into.
expressed-
Listen, if you're jumping into the ocean, you know how deep the ocean goes, bro? You would just have to know how to swim up, though, bro. Like, mad people don't know how to... Bro, I fucking plug my nose, swim up. But if you're in the middle of the ocean, GG's. If you're near land, though, you could swim to land. Especially, bro, when your life's in the line, you know how much adrenaline pump you have in your heart?
Some familiarity
But if it's like a
with
lake,
parachutes,
GG's,
its
you're
actual
dead.
confidence level
You're actually
is
dead.
up for debate. It's widely believed that Cooper demanded 2 pairs of parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, to make the authorities believe that he intended
Or
to
you could
take
just get
the
a parachute.
hostage. That is precisely what happened, as the FBI contemplated, but eventually decided against sabotaging the chutes as they did not want to risk the life of an innocent civilian. But in their haste to obtain them, they unintentionally provided Cooper with a non-functional dummy chute intended for training purposes. This mishap seems to have gone unnoticed by Cooper because that dummy chute was one of the 2 missing from the
No.
plane. Not only that, but Cooper chose the older and technically inferior parachute
Fucking
out of the
moron.
2 primary chutes provided. So in both cases, it seems like Cooper made the worst possible choice.
No, bro.
But
See,
the
hey. Me, I would have took the primary shoot and the reservative shoot.
Other ways to interpret this information.
Jinxie's
For
1 in
instance,
10.
It's possible that Cooper used the dummy chute not as a reserve, but as a means to secure the bag of money. In fact, that is precisely what
What's a
Cooper
dummy
tried to do
chute?
with the functional reserve chute. First, he tried to place the money in the chute's canopy before removing some of the suspension lines and wrap them around the bag. Perhaps he used the dummy chute for a similar purpose. And Cooper's decision to
A
use
fake
the
one?
older primary chute is not necessarily an indication of inexperience. It could also be a sign of familiarity, because the chute he left behind was a civilian luxury chute, while the one he used
Why wouldn't
was
you
a
take
military
that?
chute. The argument is that Cooper might have been trained as, say, a paratrooper, and chose the older military chute because that's the one with which he was most familiar. And there is at least one other reason to suspect that Cooper had a military background. While the flight was in a holding pattern near Seattle, Cooper mentioned that the McCord Air Force Base was only 20 minutes away from the Seattle-Tacoma airport. At the time, that was an accurate assessment and might suggest a military background.
He could have went to the
Apart
Air
from
Force.
potential military connections, Cooper may even have had links to the Central Intelligence Agency. You see, the
Links? Who
type
is
of
this
aircraft which
guy?
Cooper chose to hijack, a Boeing 727, was also used by the CIA to covertly drop agents and supplies during the Vietnam War. A task for which the Boeing 727 was uniquely qualified.
Whoa. We're going off topic now, bro. Why are we talking about Vietnam's war?
Cooper chose to hijack a Boeing 727 specifically because it provided a relatively safe means of escape. Whether he learned of this from the CIA or came to that conclusion independently is another question.
What's this guy's
However,
name?
the fact that Cooper chose to hijack a flight operated by Northwest Airlines was apparently random chance. When Tina Mucklow asked Cooper about his motives, he responded, "It's not because I have a grudge towards your airline, it's just because I have a grudge."
He hella
further
racist for
clarified
that.
Flight 305 just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
He lying.
Even so,
See,
it's
that's what a
clear that
racist would
Cooper
say,
came
bro.
Prepared. He seemed to know a great deal about aircraft and aviation. He appeared to be familiar with
This
the
shit was like
local
the
terrain.
70s
He
too.
maintained a low profile to avoid a panic. He covered his eyes with a pair of glasses to conceal his identity. he left very little evidence behind, and he demanded 4 parachutes to force the assumption that he was taking a hostage. He was even cunning enough to reclaim the note which he'd initially given to Florence Schaffner. Apart from the name he wrote on his plane ticket, there are no other samples of Cooper's handwriting.
Dan Cooper.
But
That's
for all
shitty ass
his
handwriting,
planning
bro.
and
He should have wrote in
It
cursive.
seems Cooper did not give enough thought to his eventual escape. Not only did he
Chat, you know how to write in
specify
cursive?
a route, but he was forced to make a last-minute destination change from Mexico City to Reno. He could have demanded more appropriate parachuting equipment like a pair of boots, a helmet, or jumpsuit. He could even have specified the ransom to be delivered in larger denominations to make it lighter and less cumbersome to carry. Presuming he did survive the fall and made it safely to the ground, he may then have had to make his way through a dense, partially snow-covered forest in nothing but loafers and a
fuck
trench
no.
coat in late November. I get the distinct impression that Cooper's escape was much more of a leap of faith than a carefully executed jump. On the other hand, authorities never received a missing persons report matching the description of Cooper in the wake of the hijacking. This might suggest
He
that
actually looks
Cooper
straight
did
out of the mob,
survive,
I'm not even
and that
trolling.
he swiftly and quietly resumed his normal routine. Furthermore, other hijackers have performed similar stunts, and many of them did survive, even if they were quickly apprehended. Finally, the simplest explanation for how 3 bundles of cash ended up at Tina Bar is human intervention. At the end of the day,
This
most
guy's
of
a
this is
fucking
based on
idiot.
nothing but supposition. Without any concrete evidence of Cooper's demise, it leaves the door wide open to the far more exciting proposition that he did, in fact, survive.
Yo, this guy's a moron, bro. Why wouldn't you just wait to go to Mexico? Like, what?
By the time the press got wind of the hijacking, the FBI
No,
had
Chad, you guys
already begun
agree?
to investigate a few potential suspects. Among them was a man in Portland with initials DB and surname Cooper.
DB
This
Cooper.
Cooper was quickly eliminated as a suspect, but due to a mix-up by the press, the name Dan Cooper was confused for DB Cooper, and the rest is history.
What do you mean they would have
While
waited for
Dan
him?
Cooper is most likely a pseudonym, there is a comic book series of the same name. The comic is written in French and centers around a Canadian pilot named Dan Cooper. While the comic was not translated into English nor sold in the United States before
I guess I'm Cliff
1971,
Harmon.
it was available in Canada, which has a large French-speaking population. Given that American and Canadian accents can be difficult to distinguish, it's possible that Cooper, who was described as having no discernible accent, was a bilingual Canadian. This might even be supported by something that Cooper might have said.
Wow.
You see, when the captain relayed Cooper's demands to air traffic control, he used the phrase negotiable American currency. It seems doubtful that an American citizen would specify American
So he was
currency,
French,
so
Chad.
perhaps Cooper was not American.
Or Canadian, my bad.
The problem is, we don't know if this is a direct quote from Cooper or paraphrasing by the captain. For instance, notes taken by the crew during the hijacking merely contain the phrase negotiable currency, while testimonies provided by the crew after the hijacking include phrases like $200,000.
See, that's aura. I want $200,000 cash by 5 p.m. That's
in
aura right
cash
there, bro.
and circulated US
This guy like
currency.
invented aura.
So Cooper might have been Canadian, and he might have taken his name from the Dan Cooper comics, just as he might have been American, and might have taken his
He
name
looks
from
Canadian.
something or
Nah, he
someone
don't.
else. Nearly half a century has gone by since the hijacking took place, and in that time thousands of suspects have been questioned and investigated. It would obviously be impossible to cover all of them here, but let's take a look at some of the people that at some point or another have been suspected of being DB Cooper.
What the fuck? Yeah, imagine like going to a fucking store and they're like, yo, are you DB Cooper? And they just like start harassing you.
Rackstraw first became a suspect in 1978, and on the surface, he seems like a solid candidate. He was a decorated army paratrooper and helicopter pilot. He had experience with explosives. He had an extensive criminal record. He had an uncle named John Cooper who was an avid skydiver. He was expelled from the army only months before the hijacking, which might suggest a motive. After all, the hijacker did say he had a grudge. When confronted by journalists and private investigators, Rackstraw would neither confirm nor outright deny that he was DB Cooper. Instead, he'd say things like, "I could have been," or "I would not
What the
discount myself."
fuck?
On the other hand,
Bro, just say
Rackstraw
no.
had light-colored eyes, which Cooper did not. More significantly, Rackstraw was only 28 years of age at the time of the hijacking. This is well outside the range of ages reported by the crew and passengers, most of whom believed Cooper was in his mid-40s.
Bro, just tell him you're not DB Cooper.
Kenneth Christensen first became a suspect in 2003 when his brother noticed certain parallels between him and Cooper. Christensen had briefly served as a paratrooper in World War II, and since 1953 he'd worked for Northwest Airlines as both a mechanic and a flight attendant. He was 45 years old at the time of the hijacking.
His brother ran? No way.
Which Cooper might have been. For instance, Cooper used his left hand to interact with his briefcase, and the clip-on tie he left on board was affixed with a tie clasp applied from the left. Shortly before he died in 1994, Christensen had supposedly told his brother, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." After his passing, his family discovered over $200,000 in his bank accounts. To top it all off, Florence Schaffner stated that photographs of Christensen bore a strong resemblance to
It was
Cooper.
him.
On the other hand, Christensen did not match the physical description of Cooper.
Oh, so
he was
it's not.
both shorter and lighter. While Schaffner did see a strong resemblance, she remarked that Cooper had more hair, and that is supported
Yeah,
by
this
the
guy got like
composite sketches.
a fucking
And
Jinxie
there
cut,
was
bro.
nothing suspicious about the large sums of money which he'd simply earned by selling land. Richard McCoy first became a suspect in 1972 when he
Looks like
hijacked
fucking
a Boeing
Abraham Lincoln.
727 and escaped via the aft stairway, much
Jason
like
got
DB
22.
Cooper.
Wow.
Because of the significant overlap between the two hijackings, some believe they must have been committed by the same person. McCoy used a fake name, he used a fake hand grenade to threaten the crew, he used handwritten notes to issue his demands. Both McCoy and Cooper used the phrase "no funny stuff" as a warning to the crew.
I'm gonna start using
McCoy
that now,
demanded
chat.
$500,000
No funny
in
stuff.
cash and 4 parachutes. McCoy also bailed out the back of the plane once they passed over his hometown in the state of Utah. Apart from the similar modus operandi, McCoy had also served in the Vietnam War as a demolitions expert and a helicopter pilot. McCoy did actually survive the fall and managed to evade authorities for 2 full days before he was apprehended and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Before his death in 1974, McCoy refused to confirm or deny that he was DB Cooper.
Bro,
On
just
the
tell
other
him
hand,
no.
McCoy was an avid recreational skydiver and even came prepared with a skydiving helmet and jumpsuit. He gave very specific instructions about the flight path. In addition to the fake hand grenade, McCoy also used an unloaded handgun to threaten the crew. He failed to retrieve one of the notes he'd given to a flight attendant. He was only 29 years of age at the time of the hijacking.
This low-key adding up,
and
chat.
all 3 flight attendants were quite certain that McCoy was not Cooper.
Oh,
While
never
there
mind.
are meaningful parallels between these 2 cases, McCoy might simply have been a copycat who'd read about DB Cooper in the news. Dwayne Weber first became a suspect
Yo, hot
in
knives, get on my balls,
1995
bro.
when, shortly before his death, he supposedly told his wife, "I've got a secret to tell you. I am Dan Cooper."
Whoa.
Following his deathbed confession, Weber's widow recalled a number of fascinating details. She claims to have found a bank bag resembling the one used in the hijacking.
That was him.
She claims Weber had sustained a knee injury after jumping out of a plane. Weber supposedly had a nightmare about leaving his fingerprints on the aft stairs. And a year before the money was discovered at Tina Bar, Weber had allegedly paid a quick visit to the same location. In addition, Weber was a World War II veteran, he had an extensive criminal record, he'd matched the physical description, and he was 47 years old in 1971.
Low key,
On the other
chat.
hand, Weber's fingerprints did not match any of the prints collected from Flight 305.
So it's
Although,
not him.
to be fair, there's no way to know if any of those prints actually belonged to Cooper. Furthermore, Weber's DNA did not match a DNA sample collected from the tie clasp. But once again, there's no way to know if the DNA on the tie clasp actually came from the hijacker and not someone else. What's so frustrating is that the FBI likely had a much better source of DNA at one point. If you recall, 8 cigarette butts were collected from the scene, and there's a
Okay.
good chance they were all suffused with Cooper's DNA. The problem is,
You could swap that,
evidence
huh?
was lost at some point, and has not turned up since.
Nice. How do you just lose evidence, bro? Like, what? How do you just lose
William
it?
Smith first became a suspect in 2018. Smith served in the Navy during World War II and likely had some experience with parachuting. He was 43 years old at the time of the hijacking. He had dark brown eyes. He matched the physical description. He shared a certain likeness with the composite sketches, especially
Jason
the
got
speculative
24.
sketch of an older DB Cooper. A student named Ira Daniel Cooper, who was killed in World War II, attended the same high school as Smith. Smith worked as a yardmaster for a railroad company for most of his life, but in 1970 the company filed for bankruptcy. As a consequence, Smith lost his pension, which might suggest a...
Yo, there's so many suspects, bro. How do they know? Like, bro, do they just find a random person off the street and they're like, oh, you're DB Cooper? Like, how do they find them, bro? Like, how does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? This shit's gotta be fake.
Motive.
I'm not yapping, dog. I'm like giving questions. Solid
The airline
questions.
industry for their role in bringing about the downfall of the rail transportation industry. It's further speculated that Smith could have used his knowledge of railroad networks to hop on a train and escape undetected. On the other hand, Smith spent his entire life in the northeastern United States. Given that the hijacking occurred on the other side of the country and was committed by someone who at least appeared to be familiar with the local
You reckon
terrain,
he's still alive now?
Smith is not the most ideal candidate. However, the fact that Smith worked as a yardmaster is interesting. You see, the tie that Cooper left behind was recently examined using an electron microscope, which uncovered various metallic particles. Some of these particles, especially pure titanium, were quite rare in 1971. This might suggest that Cooper worked as a manager at some sort of chemical or metallurgical facility, or possibly a rail yard.
So, alright, bro, they just gave us like 4
If nothing
suspects.
else, I hope this
Which one
limited
is it?
selection of suspects
They haven't
illustrates
caught him
just
yet?
how difficult it is to be certain when you have...
Which one do you guys think it is, bro? I don't know, dog. They haven't caught it yet? Yo, this shit was in the 70s.
so little evidence to work with. These 5 individuals look nothing
He's
alike,
still out?
yet any one of them could be DB
How
Cooper.
old would he be?
Was Cooper really in his mid-40s, or did he simply look old for his age? Did Cooper really serve in the military? Which one of these sketches most closely resemble Cooper? In 2016, the FBI had to admit defeat and officially close down the case. Unless someone stumbles
so they
upon
lost.
Cooper's remains or manages to track down the rest of the money, it seems there is little hope of resolution. Did Cooper
I think he's
survive?
dead, chat.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
As long as that possibility cannot be dismissed, the legend of DB Cooper will no doubt persist.
Alright, so, did you guys think he survived the plane drop? Screen dash, get out of here. Did you guys think he survived the plane drop? Yes? Bro, I think he did too. I think he did too. But here's the thing. Alright, he's definitely not alive right now. You guys agree with that, right? You guys agree with that? He's 100% not alive. But here's the thing, bro. Which person is it? Which person is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which one? What? It might have not been any. None of them? So DB Cooper is just DB Cooper, huh? 1, 2, 3, 4. You guys think it's this guy? The one smiling? Oh, this guy. It's a video called The Search for DB Cooper. Bro, so is this like the first time where the FBI lost? They took a L?